Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Respect Project conversation. Happy Sunday. Today, we're talking about the concept of keeping calm in chaos, which almost seems like an imposter type topic because it seems almost impossible from a human point of view to maintain that. But I've chosen friends and colleagues and mentors to join us this afternoon here in Los Angeles to talk about this topic, because for me, each of you do have an exemplary way of achieving that in your lives. And I've admired you all very, very much. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce everybody. Jon Jashni is a financial investor and advisor, and he is the founder of Raintree Ventures. SEPIDEH MOAFI is an actress and an activist. She is also an ambassador for the International Refugee Committee. NAZIE EFTEKHARI is a dear friend. She is the founder of, she is the principal architect of Healthez. Guru JAGAT is the founder of the Rohm Institute, and Peter Arthur is a US Navy veteran, as well as a bioengineer. I wanted to start with a quote because I think so much about happiness being something that's so personal, and to try to be calm in our lives is truly an art form. But Gandhi said our greatest ability as human beings is not to change the world, but to change ourselves. And I think it takes deliberate action to maintain that type of philosophy in our lives. NAZIE, without further ado, I wanted to ask you, from a personal point of view, what is it in your life that has helped you transform negatives into positives? And how have you been able to maintain that, not only personally, spiritually, but also professionally in a leadership position?
It's a great question. I don't know exactly how to answer that and with any sort of accuracy, but I feel like in life, in business, in everything, you have a choice. You either look for the light and go to the light, or you let the darkness swallow you up. And it's just a lot easier to go to the light. So I don't know how I see it. I don't know why I see it, but that's the way I see difficult situations.
Has that knowledge and wisdom come from personal experience? I mean, do you feel like sharing perhaps a little bit about your background?
Well, yes, I think that probably the most inconceivable thing in the world is to lose your country, to lose your home, to lose your country, to lose all your yearbooks, to lose all your family photographs, to even lose your diplomas and degrees that you got. And, one day, in what felt like the blink of an eye, all of that was taken away from those of us who were citizens of Iran and had grown up there and loved the country and had everything we had. Our identity was associated with the country. And it was so, it was just so horrifying that, you spent a certain amount of time just denying the reality that this has happened, or that this is about you. You can't go back. You don't have a place there anymore. And, I was fortunate enough to land in the United States, where, everything is possible. And so, that event left me so unanchored. It really took me maybe 20 years to figure out the damage that had been done. When there was another uprising in Iran and I was watching the kids, and the reaction was so visceral and physical that I suddenly realized, oh my gosh, that left a much bigger imprint. I thought in the intervening years, I had gotten degrees, I had had children, I had started a business. I am the personification of the American dream. And then I realized the mark that had left on me. So, it's, Elisabeth, it's such a great question. And I don't know if people are, half glass, half full, half empty. I just think the glass is always refillable if you look around, and it doesn't matter what the status of the glass is at any point in time. So it's just, it's easier. it's easier to live life that way than to just allow it to, the rest of it to swallow you up.
Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning when he was imprisoned during the Second World War. And that is another part of what I want to discuss with each of you, because I know you also personally and deeply, but it's also the prison of the mind, right? What he achieved in that book and at that time is he realized that the freedom really lies in the mind, to not be attached to our fear, our despair, our suffering. And when we've experienced a lot of suffering or trauma, I think we actually have an added advantage. Adversity can be an incredible tool, and it also strengthens us, right? I'm going through a lot right now with my daughter that's deeply difficult, but I know I'm becoming stronger. You know, the iron is getting stronger in the fire. And so that's part of why I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your background, because I do think people who have a masterful way of keeping calm in chaos have probably had some pretty big chaos from their childhood, or at least a big defining moment as an adult that was indelible and changed the way they responded to things in life. Jon Jashni, I'm curious, because to me, you always are so, you know, as a mentor, as a CEO, as somebody that's a founder of companies, and ultimately a leader, but also in your personal life and with family, a peace of mind, mental health, calmness really reigns supreme, at least whenever I turn to you for guidance and we share in deep conversations. So how and when do you feel that indelible moment happened for you to really value peace of mind and to lead from that point of view?
Well, thanks for asking me to join today. I've been giving a lot of thought to this, as have so many, obviously, given the disrupted year that we've been traveling. Generally speaking, I have a low affect, as my time here with you today will prove probably. But I think that I've often said that on the one hand, in the more treacherous businesses that I've had to navigate, that sometimes people confuse seeming placidity or balance with weakness or some invitation to transgress. And for me, I have tried to convert what might be seen as deficits into superpowers, meaning if someone is going to underestimate you or confuse that balance or placidity with a vacuum that they're going to fill with their agenda, one can also look at it as an opportunity to treat that underestimation as a catalyst for subsequent overperformance. Meaning, don't judge a book by its cover. Don't discount someone's capabilities or strength or what they might bring to any given situation based on initial impression or personal presentation. And that leads me to a branching thought, which is that chaos for me has always been what I've regarded as the default state in the world, which is alarming sounding, but actually is intended to be a comforting epiphany, because it is a conceit, this structure and order that we enjoy on a daily basis. Law is a fiction that we have enacted in order to allow for structure to give us peace of mind and give us fixed data points, which we can then anchor to as we move into the unknown and try to do so with less risk or the right kind of risk, right? And so if, as I have tried to do, you can come around to realizing that control is a fiction, our ability to manage what we might have real responsibility for and accountability to, but not have full control over, is a way of being. It becomes almost Eastern and, like, if you will, martial arts in its aspect. I don't know whether Peter is a martial artist as a function of his military training, and and I'm not a martial artist myself, but I feel like the ability to use muscle memory and resilience to not just recover from a blind side, but almost like cartilage between bones, adapt, react, exist, and move forward. I think it's been a helpful mindset for me. So I have made a career in some of the most unstable and sometimes hostile environments. And I was determined not to be like a meteor hurling through the atmosphere where the movement through the environment and the external effects on you as you move through the environment, I was determined to not have it destroy me or affect me, except in the best possible ways, if possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that goes to the heart of what you were asking.
No, it really, really does, because I think my daughter said to me once, she goes, "You wake up and you're like always happy." And I said, "Yeah, that's just not the case." I said, "But I choose to be happy. I choose that lane because I came from so much personal chaos, and I felt whatever I felt pain was in my childhood." And again, keeping calm in chaos, and to your point, John, this particular time with this global pandemic, but also politically here in the United States, that we're so saturated with chaos. It's this incredible breeding ground for practicing those skills, that muscle memory that you're talking about, and really allowing this time, much like traumas in childhood or traumas in business, because of being in a leadership position, which all of you are. You're all CEOs and founders of your companies. That is also a breeding ground for becoming masterful with those skills, those ultimate skills, which give you peace of mind and allow you to detach from this human experience and to lead from that point of view. And you referenced this Buddhist way of thinking, so it makes me think of Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Vietnamese refugee, also a Buddhist, and he is a peace leader. And he said, when an unpleasant feeling, physical or mental, arises in us, the wise person does not worry, complain, weep, pound their chest, pull their hair, torture their body or mind, or faint. They calmly observe the feeling and are aware that it is only a feeling. And in parentheses, I would say all feelings are temporary. So he said that we know that that feeling is not actual, and we are not caught up in that feeling. And therefore, the pain of that moment cannot bind us. We are boundless. And so having a conversation also with SEPIDEH, who's deeply involved, and I thought NAZIE and SEPI would have a really strong connection, because SEPIDEH has done a lot of work for refugees and with the International Refugee Committee, but there's a personal deep narrative to that. And I think, knowing you as I do, you bring that light and that positivity wherever you go, but it comes from a deep narrative. I'd love for you to share a little bit about.
Sure, yeah, it's just for clarity, it's the International Rescue Committee, and it's one of the leading refugee resettlement agencies in the world. And I myself, because as mentioned earlier, because of the revolution, my family was forced to leave Iran, and they lived in camps for about 4 years. And this was after the revolution and during the Iran-Iraq war. And I was born in a refugee camp in Germany, and we had the opportunity to come to the States, which is truly, especially in this day and age, a luxury, as refugee resettlement has, is now at an all-time low, a historic low, unprecedented. And so, I feel incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to not only live the American dream, right? To pursue the sorts of subjects, projects, ideas, philosophies that I am interested in. That truly feels like a luxury, but to also give back in any way that I can. And yeah, sort of piggybacking on what's already been said, I think whenever you think of adversity as an opportunity rather than something that knocks you down. It's just an opportunity to find different ways to get up, to pivot. Because it's very easy whenever you're in a room that's seemingly dark, that's all black, to focus on that and spiral in that. But if there's even the tiniest dot, the tiniest little sliver of light, that can pull you forward. And I think with everything that's going on right now, not just in the States, but around the world, and us, kind of in solidarity in a way with this pandemic, it's been an opportunity for us to bridge gaps and really empathize with what the day-to-day conditions are and can be for people who are much less fortunate than us. I think it's shocked us all into a different version of reality that is deeply painful, but also I'm sure, as is the case for everyone, how many people that I know and in myself have been forced to re-examine our lives and pursue that, activate that joy muscle within us, because it's not going to come for free. It's like you said, Elisabeth, with your daughter, you wake up so happy, and that's a practice. Happiness is not a coincidence, and so I think that really digging into our purpose and our, the sorts of activities or people or even thoughts, because these belief systems that we carry are just practiced. The belief is the thought that is just repeated over and over. So I know from my experience in this past year and a half, it's been really examining the thoughts that have maybe grown stale, and that I can, shift gears and move them in a different direction to bring me a different kind of, maybe not always joy, but satisfaction and that little sliver of light that I can move towards.
I think also coming from your background, and I think at least, sort of reflecting on my own, that muscle memory is there. And so we have the wisdom, to see that, it's like this old saying, the barn has burned down, now I can see the moon. Because through the loss comes the opportunity, and through that vulnerability and humanity comes hopefully the ability to not only lead in our lives by example, but also in leadership positions like you all are, and also Peter too, being a Navy veteran. But I'm curious, in being a leader, have you led from a place of humanity and vulnerability? Have you been able to do that? You're muted.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
And thank you all for inviting me on this panel and being in your presence too. But to your question, Liz, being a Navy veteran, a lot of the humanity that you gain, and I say gain because you're given the privilege of experimenting with people's lives. And a lot of the conversation usually can be on the victimizing aspect of chaos, how it's received. But a lot of my reflection is on how I've affected people. And that aspect, a lot of people, sometimes they don't tend to recognize that in the contribution in their lives. I focus on that because in recognizing how I've affected people, I've actually been able to stay calmer in chaotic situations because I can empathize to those contributing to it. Case in point, if I'm watching someone treat someone disingenuously in a relationship, or I'm watching some leader maybe holding back a right or a privilege to extend to someone, I'm watching that leader, I'm watching them with some type of sympathy because I'm saying to themselves, oh my God, you're scared or you're fearful. I know what that was like and you don't want to let anyone in on it. You are covering for yourself. You don't want to be exposed. I've been in that situation where I didn't want to be exposed. I didn't want to let on that I didn't have it all together and I didn't know what I was doing. And I've affected people. I've learned from it And that was the beauty of staying in leadership, is that you learn how you can correct your effect on people. Less about, for me, what people have done to me. That's been a lot of chaos have been impacted on me. But a lot of my life now is reflecting on how have I affected others in position of authority in decisions I've made. I rarely often hear people being forthright about that aspect in the contribution to chaos.
Well, you've been through a lot of chaos lately, just personally on a personal level. And I think actually watching you as a friend, I actually think you've purified in such a incredible way, even through the chaos and tragedy of what you've been through. You shared us a little bit recently with the last, year and a half, what you have gone through, because I think you have become more masterful, Peter, in your life, at the cost of something very terrible. But I think it's provided a lot of change in your life and growth.
Yes, it has. John mentioned something that I had to take note of, and it was about this idea of this illusion we have in our lives. Laws help it, and this sense of not knowing when your time will come. It gives us it's very illusionary to us too. I've been through a tragic accident, and I've been recovering for the last 2 years. I've been in major surgeries. I've been in an amputation. I've had, which I'm now healing back from, major tendon transfers. And what I've realized is so fictional in people's perception is this idea that when they see tragedy or they see what chaos has brought, people who haven't been through anything have a false sense that they need to have sympathy for you. But what this has done to me is exposed that I have an appreciation, because I came close to death. Someone who had a diagnosis and had been reversed has an appreciation that they actually been given a perspective on life, that I need to take another look at it. I need to appreciate today's day. But as someone who has a sense, if you ask someone who hasn't been in tragedy, how long will you live? They'll shoot a number out there. They have no more guarantee than I do, but their sense of entitlement to this extended life gives them a posture that almost they feel sympathetic to someone who has been through tragedy. No, I'm actually in a better place because of this. I can take life in at a better, it tastes a little different to me. And you don't need to be sympathetic for me, because I've been brought to the edge to kind of to reflect back and say, man, you know what? I can actually appreciate the humanity around me. The strawberries taste a little different. The flower looks a little different. I can take you in, this conversation's a little different. I need to have sympathy for the people who have a self-entitlement to what life won't bring them.
Mm. Yeah, no, I understand exactly what you're saying. It's something that we've talked about a lot before, but as I was saying to my daughter, I choose to, like you said, I choose to savor this life, because I've experienced in my own life the loss of many loved ones, and also some tragedy in childhood, and things like that have made me be assertive in my daily life to say, this is the moment, this moment, and so I guess my question to you, Guru Jagat, because you are a teacher, a peace leader, and you've made it your purpose to help other people find peace and calm in their life and give each other those tools. But, can we transmute chaos by absorbing more beauty and, delighting, like with childlike enthusiasm, with the little things in life, as opposed to getting lost in the big chaotic moments that we're all presented with, especially right now in this last year?
Yeah. Well, I think just to mirror what both Peter and John kind of mentioned in terms of just where these things lie in spiritual tradition or different spiritual teachings, and some of my favorite are both kind of from this perspective of chaos is good news. When there's chaos in life, when there's chaos in the kind of outer world, this is good news because it means it's come as an awakening. And ultimately the soul has incarnated for that awakening journey, not for the sleepwalking journey. And it is a choice because we have free will, and it's a choice in every moment. And Peter, thank you for just the depth of your transmission, because part of the spiritual teaching is, and you kind of have to fake it if you haven't been through something like you have been through, Peter, and others here and others watching now and in the future, which is that if you're not in contact with death, if you're not in contact with that which is immediately ephemeral, which is your human body, not your consciousness, not your soul, but your human body. If you don't have a contact point of that that's real, not just like an idea, but actually a real experience, which is such a huge treasure and a gift. That's ultimately what meditation or spiritual practice is about, is to give you a contact access point that's real, that is it allows you to appreciate chaos, allows you to understand in an immediate, real way that this what's happening in this moment, what's happening in this body, what's happening in my bank account, what's happening in my thought process, what's happening in my relationship. This is very soon going to change, and I'm going to die, and and who knows how soon or long it will be before those things happen. But we know one thing, the constant, which is it's going to change. And I love this teaching, which is basically shame is shame because it's when we have decided that we're going to stay the same. So same is shame, and that shame that we feel, for all sorts of reasons, is ultimately a clue that I'm not changing. I'm not participating in the experience of the changing relay of the human incarnation, which is aging, which is, things coming and going, which is the ebb and flow, which is businesses succeeding and failing, which is tragedies happening and loss and all of these things. So ultimately that's what the whole kind of idea of sitting for a moment and focusing on your breath, or focusing on some sort of sound pattern, or just focusing on beauty, or focusing on love, someone you love, or maybe someone who's challenging to you, and having a moment of respect, or kind of honor for the challenge that they've brought into your life, a worthy adversary, as Don Juan calls it. So these are all this is the nucleus of all contemplative practice, and walking the beauty way is to have some direct touch into that ephemerality. And the way most people live is that they choose to ignore that. And then so when it comes into their life, they're so shocked, they're so thrown off balance, they're so kind of confused. But that's not a real way to live. And I think if the past year has given us, so many gifts, but that's a huge gift if we choose to receive it, that this is life. This is how it works. And in terms of like my what I think is the basis of showing up in a different way, it's strength, and it's the strength of the nervous system, which some people are strong because of things they've been through. Some people, haven't had that privilege to go through things and have to face things. So they're weak in the nervous system in a certain way. And a lot of what we do to ourselves makes us weak in the nervous system. But if you have a strong nervous system, which all of you have described different versions of this, then what comes up in a day, or what comes up in a relationship, or what comes up in a tragedy or a loss is a place where there's a beckoning of the soul, and the soul is actually kind of dancing, because an experience is going to be had and evolution is going to be served. So that's, you know, that's kind of the game.
I love that. I love that. And I like the way you describe like dancing with, you know, pivoting. Sepida said, you're saying dancing, you know, being able to be flexible, you know, within the personal experiences. And I think that that's what mental freedom is, not attaching to the experiences that are being presented to us. Somebody asked the Dalai Lama once, probably many times, does he ever get angry? And he laughed and he said, of course, he just moves through it. And, you know, not to compare you, John, to the Dalai Lama, but, you know, I do love and respect you very, very much. And I do think you have achieved mental freedom, which ultimately is what a lot of us are talking about. How do we maintain calm and chaos? A lot of it is achieving a mental freedom and ability to dance with chaos, or to pivot in and out of it with grace. And, you know, feelings like despair or anger or jealousy, or even the delusion of the experience itself. I mean, I feel you really have achieved mental freedom in that way. I hope you see it the same. And if so, you know, how have you achieved that? And what inspired you to make that a priority in your life?
Well, you're being too generous in your
I don't think
assessment
so.
that I have achieved it, because I do feel, especially over the last 5 years, that I've evolved greatly in that area. And I'm thankful for it, because I spent so much unproductive time on anxiety and the arrogance of thinking that with proaction, I could negate blindsides or negative outcomes just by virtue of me applying foresight and pattern recognition to the future. And what inevitably happened for me was that it was always the unanticipated unknown that ended up creating some sort of disruption that needed to be dealt with. And, you know, maybe something that caused anxiety, pain, or a business setback, or whatever it is, something dissonant and unpleasant as we define those things. And when I came to regard those things, when I stopped labeling them as positive or negative, or being upset that this upsetting, anxiety producing thing had occurred, I tried to retrain myself to expect those things to occur, to have them be seen as deviations either from the conceit that you could predict the future, or a deviation from a pattern in the past that was no longer a relevant pattern and had been moved on from by virtue of what stage of life you were in, what level of growth and evolution you had achieved for yourself personally. So all of this is to say that I realized that instead of giving myself extra credit for anticipating what might come, trying to ensure against the negative fallout from what might come that I deemed a negative outcome, which in itself might be a wrong label, right? Because the things that allow us to grow and evolve are usually the things that, it's like getting in the gym, you know, your muscles hurt until you go back in the next week and you realize that you have more resilience and strength, but you wouldn't necessarily have wanted to repeat the pain that got you to that place, but you're grateful for what it's resulted in. So I spent too much time waiting for the other shoe to drop, and realized ultimately what a waste that was, that to be tense and almost in perversely seeking validation for your paranoia that the outcome did occur. I knew it was going to happen. I bought insurance against the downside effects of what would happen when it happened, but I didn't get the right kind of insurance because it didn't insure me fully against these things that I should have anticipated, but in large part haven't been planned for. And I realized, you know what, that torturous paragraph I just laid out were mental gymnastics I didn't need to do. And when this is where I went to the martial arts example I used earlier when I referenced Peter, I realized that true strength lay for me in being vulnerable to whatever came and giving myself credit for the resilience and the muscle memory I spoke of and the ability to contend with that which might sneak up on you. And I thought, well, what am I going to do with all this extra time that I used to apply to trying to predict the future and arrogantly thinking I could control it or ensure against negative outcomes within it? And I realized it was just a much more pleasant place to be, having the confidence and the maturity and the middle life realization that, well, nothing's killed me yet. If something's going to kill me, it's going to happen, as Peter was referencing, not to be indelicate about it. And that gave me a strength and a kind of, no offense, don't give a fuck attitude. I do give a fuck, and I treat people in an egalitarian way. And I, by virtue of how you've referred to how our relationship has grown, I clearly have your warrant. So I don't have to worry about my casualness or my relaxation resulting in indifference or carelessness. So I was raised well enough that I know what's right and wrong and how to treat people and how not to treat them. So with that as a base, everything else is mine to determine. And if I determine not to worry or be anxious, usually I manifest situations where I don't need to worry about things that I used to spend too much time worrying about, if that helps.
Yeah, no, it does. I think, I mean, this is a really Buddhist way of thinking. You know what I mean? There's this thought that says letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we still cling to anything and everything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we're never going to be free. So, not giving a fuck or giving a fuck, that's sort of that small separation, like Eckhart Tolle said, between the experience and like our psychic selves. You know what I mean? So there is freedom in that. There's freedom in caring about humanity and being a great leader, being a loving family member or friend, and also maintaining that sort of vessel, your side of the street where it's what you just expressed. But I think, like we've kind of touched on a couple of times, there is a muscular habitual thing we must work on all the time, even if we come from a narrative of a lot of adversity. How do we continually, consistently, vigilantly continue to maintain turning our pain into our own personal power, Nazie? I think of you with so much admiration. I look up to you so much, for many reasons, but mostly because you always, much like Easton said about me, my daughter, she said, Mom, you're always happy, but I know you. So I know this is a choice you make. So I'm curious to hear you sort of reflect on that.
Well, thank you. I wish I could better explain to you what the source of that is. And I also wish I could find a way to transfer it. I do think happiness is a choice. I come from a generation where we were told that if we would have to articulate 5-year plans and 10-year plans and where do you want to be, and if you do all of these things, you will get to where you want to be. And it turned out none of that was accurate. And the people who told us believed it, certainly, but it turned out that none of it was accurate. And we followed the guide and we wrote our plans and we did everything. And in the end, life transpired as it was intended to, and we reacted as best as we could. I do think, Elisabeth, happiness is a choice. I know people who don't have any money and don't have seemingly any prospects for the future, and they seem a lot happier than my friends who have achieved and accomplished and should be at the pinnacle of life. You go to villages in certain countries and you see a pure happiness that you don't see in other places where you expect them. I think the Dalai Lama says the very purpose of life is happiness. That is the purpose. That's why, not happiness in the selfish sense of it, not happiness at somebody else's expense, but that's what you're here for. It is not, it's very contrary, and as Sepide will testify, to our culture. Our culture is the very purpose of life is to suffer and suffer and suffer and then get your reward somewhere else. But somehow, some of us broke those chains of bondage from that perception that if we are not, I was sent away to boarding school when I was 8 years old. But I don't feel like I had a terrible childhood. I feel somehow that I was loved and I was cared for, and that was just part of the process of growing up. The past is the past. I'm very fascinated by the conversation earlier about how chaos is probably the more natural state, and all the laws and rules that we put in there for our own comfort. That what we should really reconcile ourselves to is that chaos is the natural order. And maybe 2020, the big lesson was, hey, as I kept saying all year to everyone, buck up, suck up, and deal, because this is not something you're going to have any control over. It's just way beyond anyone's ability to control. So I think every day in every way, I just, when you and I met, we were in a drum class. Neither of us knew how to play the drums. It was a complete fiasco. For someone like me who wants to be in control, it was completely out of control. But we were having the time of our lives, and I don't know. It's just in the moment you decide I can be miserable and I can try to figure out all the ways in which this experience is a shortcoming, or I can just let go and enjoy it. And I enjoy so many things. I can't even begin to tell you.
I think there's something very beautiful about what you said, which is, ultimately like the audacity to be happy. We all are going to suffer. We're suffering so much. We've suffered so much during this time. But I think I've heard mostly from most people, and at least all of you today, that there was an opening. There was a sliver of light. There was like the barn burned down. Now I can see the moon, or like Sepide said, like this little sliver of light. And, where things get broken is where the light comes in. And during this time, most people I've talked to have said they were reminded of, of appreciating the little things. And that's a masterful sort of spiritual ninja way to live, right? Because, no matter what we're all going through, we're going to be suffering, and how we navigate that, it's a mental warfare. This COVID has been a mental warfare. Politically, which we won't get into at all, because this is a non-denominational conversation and a place of mutual respect, has been also a place of warfare. And that chaos that surrounded us, hopefully, I think, has made us turn more into delighting and finding happiness in the little things and an appreciation for them. Certainly coming from your background, Seppi, I know you have a tremendous appreciation for the little things and, and delight in life. And I think one of the great principles of happiness is having childlike enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like when you're untethered, like how do you get anchored?
That's a really beautiful question. I first just want to acknowledge and appreciate and give thanks for everything that everyone's saying and sharing. It's so beautiful, and it's like warm water on my soul. It's just really wonderful to hear you guys talk. And, something that John said that reminded me of this Richard Serra, he's an artist, quote is, "I don't give a shit, but I care quite a lot." And, this idea that you brought up earlier of like dancing and, I'd mentioned before, pivoting and dancing on the razor's edge, because nothing is guaranteed, as Peter said before. It's like, it's a privilege to think to yourself that you have, and John said too, this fictional sense of security. It's not. And that's something that COVID has really shaken for all of us, is that We are all living a fiction. So why don't we decide, as Nazie said, to be happy, strengthen that muscle? You know, it's really that easy. You look at the Helen Kellers and the Nelson Mandelas. It's like, yes, they are special for a reason, but we can all learn from them. They came before us because for a reason, and now we can use the sort of tools and the insights and the wisdom and apply it to our own lives, that we don't need our circumstances to be perfect in order to be happy. We don't need to be 25 pounds lighter, or we don't need to have, you know, and with certain people, it's more challenging than with others, you know, whenever you don't have a job, whenever you're struggling to feed your kids. This is not to neglect or negate any of that. It's just in every moment, it's not guaranteed. And so how do we choose to anchor ourselves in this moment? And I think that, again, we are constantly practicing these thought cycles, these beliefs, and we are affirming. A lot of people don't believe in affirmations, but we are constantly giving ourselves affirmations, you know, of what we don't want most of the time, you know, or what we don't believe most of the time. And so what if we just decided as an experiment, and you and I know this from our acting, Elisabeth, it's like sometimes you don't believe what's happening and you have to just fully commit to it. And then you realize that that opens up worlds within your heart, within your mind. And as human beings, we have this same ability as actors. We practice this and strengthen that creative muscle. But I think incorporating some of these creative pathways into our day-to-day lives and not being so realistic, such realists as we are, because none of it, I mean, this might be getting a little too woo-woo, but we are the sculptors of our reality, you know? And so how can we modify the thoughts, the beliefs, the emotions, really, that there are no bad emotions, as everyone has said. You know, all emotions are energy, or an abundance of energy. So how do we change our relationship to these emotions? So it's not so binary, it's not good, it's not bad. And I think that gives the sense of freedom, as you mentioned before, the sort of mental, psychological, emotional, spiritual freedom that we all really want, that then allows us, gives us permission for happiness. Because
Right.
happiness is not just, it's not guaranteed, and it's not an arrival point, it's a practice.
No, and because like you said, in regards to the acting, you know, most people, unless they're freelancers, wouldn't really relate to this. But the one thing we can count on every day is a tremendous amount of uncertainty. We don't know when we're going to work. We don't know when we're going to make money. We don't know how it's all going to happen. And much like that, that has made us be maybe very life affirming as a muscular activity every morning, to say affirmatively, no matter what, I'm going to choose to say, throw open the door and say, welcome to another day in paradise, regardless of what's happening, because this is a philosophy or a way of living. And just to share something personal, I was in my kitchen one day 10 years ago. My daughter was running around the backyard. She was chasing butterflies. And the phone rang, and I got that phone call that you'd never expect to get. And it was from my mother's husband in Amsterdam. And my mother was 60 years old. And he calls and he says, your mother had a massive heart attack. She's in a coma. I never saw my mother again. And I think those moments, to be specific, to say with the specificity of what you've talked about in regards to growing up in a refugee camp, we don't really know what is going to happen to us. What we do know is we could slide at any moment. And the muscular practices that we give ourselves in order to navigate those becomes our life's work, our life's purpose. But I think of somebody like Guru Jagat, who's made it an entire life purpose to help people achieve calm. With the Rama Institute, you teach yoga, you teach meditation, people come to you. One is, how did this become your ultimate purpose in life? And I know, because I'm a human being in a walking around in this body, that every day you have to maintain that for yourself. So as you're maintaining that for others, how do you actually maintain it for yourself? I know that's not a simple question or answer, but the acknowledgement that, you know, even great teachers such as yourself are human beings struggling with that human experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that part of what has to happen in this time, in this era of leadership, and I talk about this a lot, is that there's transparency. Like part of the positive side of the technological age is a certain level of transparency, and And then obviously there's all the dark sides of the technological age, but there's a lot. It's a polarity planet, so there's both things, and we're able to sit here with each other. I don't know where everybody is in the world, but there are amazing things about the technological age. But part of the new era of leadership is a certain type of transparency, a certain type of realness, and that's never been before. I was just talking about this in terms of some politician and some political thing, just in terms of what happened in the 80s compared to now in like a similar situation. And now it's, we have kind of the transparency of technology that just it speeds everything up. So in terms of being a leader and walking the walk and talking the talk, and I actually don't, I feel that everyone on this planet, because of one reason, because of technology, we have kind of actually, it's sensitized us, it's desensitized us, and it's actually sensitized us in a certain way. And so, because we're being forced to feel and experience people through what I would call the subtle body, rather than just in physical realm. And this has actually made us more sensitive, which is a fascinating part of the swing of the technological age, sitting in these Zoom rooms and all this kind of stuff. So I feel like in order to be a true leader in this time, you have to be transmitting what you're talking about, else nobody's going to believe you. And it's really obvious. It's just obvious. So I think just to say, the way that I look at life in terms of how I live kind of my just pragmatic life, I have 24 hours, and 10% of those hours need to go to what I would call a practice that, for me, it's a certain type of practice. It's the Kundalini technology, but whatever that practice is, whether it's exercising or being present with your children in a certain way that's off of, phones, or I don't know, whatever your practice is, but it's training the system in a way that allows you to be the kind of human you want to be, to make it simple. So for me, I'm teaching a certain skill set around being real and being strong and enjoying whatever comes. And so therefore I have to be living it. It's just this era is, you can't be, there has been, and we've had, and we're experiencing kind of the transition from leadership just across the board. I'm not talking politically specifically, just across the board, even, corporate leadership, et cetera. And we're not through it yet, these are leaders that are not talking the talk and walking the walk. And these are kind of the crises that we're facing. But as we move into this next time, I think it's everyone, everyone knows and everyone can feel whether someone is actually doing what they are teaching or what they're talking about or what they're saying. And so it's kind of a really amazing time to be a leader, because it really requires a certain type of caliber. And so I think that's exciting. So to just be pragmatic, 24 hours, 10% of those 24 hours I give to the infinite, however you want to call that, God, plants, I don't know, whatever you do, your version of that. But 2.5 hours a day I give to, what I would call the infinite or God. That's I don't think that's very much. The rest of the day I can run around and be busy and whatever. Think these things I'm doing are important, all that kind of stuff.
There's nothing more important than maintaining self-care and stillness. That I know to be true, having spoken to all of you in depth and privately. And there's a deliberate way you communicate, and I know you have achieved some sort of mental stillness inside of yourselves. Just one question for you, Peter, and then I think that there's some questions here on the side, and then we're almost done. And I don't know how the time flew by, but you guys, thank you so much again for making the time. I just wanted to ask you, Peter, certain thoughts, words come to mind when I think about how to maintain calm in chaos. One of them is forgiveness of self when we fall off this wonderful platform we're talking about of being, forgiving ourselves, forgiving others. How do we move quickly towards that and through that? And also self-respect. I want to be able to look in the mirror and respect myself, how I navigated myself, how I treated others. So self-respect and mutual respect, you know. Nazi and I have talks planned that we're doing. They're going to be based upon diversity and inclusion and equality. And a lot of that has to do with respect, mutual respect and self-respect. So just Peter, if you want to reflect on those words, and then we'll move over to some of these questions. And anything you guys want to talk to each other about in these last minutes, feel free to engage with each other.
Well, I appreciate that, Liz. I think if you were to connect self-respect with, if I keep it in the topic with chaos, I think one of the challenges I've had a long time in my career is convincing sailors and soldiers who are in tragedy. Maybe they're going through a trial, or maybe they're going through an accusation, or maybe they're receiving retaliation for something that they feel that was righteous in what they were pursuing. A lot of times they feel like because they were on the right side of good, there's a certain entitlement that they shouldn't receive backlash or receive retaliation or receive pushback for their agenda. And one of the many conversations you would have with them is, first of all, it's not a privilege for you not to have adversity just because you're trying to do the right thing. And second, while you're experiencing that adversity, you're in the valley of this issue. You can be accused, and you need to carry yourself with a certain level of dignity, because the only person to represent you in this current moment is yourself. You stand for something. Stand up for your own self when you awake before you start your day. This case, this situation could be weeks, it could be months. You could be getting pushback. We don't know how it will turn out on the other end. But in the meantime, the expectation is you carry yourself with a certain level of dignity for your own behalf, and let the situation, external situation, take its appropriate course.
I love that. You know, I love that John said, you know, what you described, John, some wisdoms that you said, these are my superpowers. And I think what you're saying, Peter, makes so much sense to me. If I was going to ask each of you one last question, I'd say, do you have this thing called life figured out? You know, and I know that you do, but I think it comes so much from what you're saying, Peter, which is having a lot of dignity of self and others, and letting that be a guiding force in your lives. So thank you so much again for your time. I felt so almost like Nazi said, that this topic itself almost had an imposter syndrome to it, because how can anybody remain calm in chaos? But it's the very thing I grapple with, and we all struggle with, particularly now, but always. And so I hope for you guys who've been with us that this has been helpful to talk about. Isabella Bernardino said to Guru and SEPIDEH, personally, do you think it's better to sink yourself into chaos when the time comes, cry and scream it out instead of repressing your emotions and later on cause an avalanche of emotions? I tend to keep things inside, especially in moments of chaos, instead of just letting my emotions run free. That's how my body deals with facing hard times, especially during the pandemic. If you have any thought about just sort of her experience, feel free to chime in.
I feel like, yeah, let it go. I hope that you have a network, or at least one person that you can lean on and not be. I know for myself, it took me a long time, and I still struggle with asking for help and being comfortable allowing myself to be what we would consider emotionally ugly, which is actually quite beautiful because it's vulnerable and it's real, and it allows you to clear. I think when we stifle or we try to suffocate emotions, you know, we live in this culture, since I've been alive at least, and only now it's shifting, this idea that there are good and bad emotions, that you should show yourself in a certain way, you should hide other things. And we don't really validate feelings. As Nazi was saying earlier, especially in our culture, it's very much like you have to always present yourself as good and everything's fine and you're happy and you're strong, and strength this sort of facade or this like veneer of strength comes from durability and toughness. And strength actually comes from vulnerability and allowing yourself to break, so that I always think of like, you know, your heart or your emotions are, you know, breaking open instead of breaking into pieces. And when we think of breaking, we think of shattering, we think of breaking into pieces. So allowing these emotions to move through you rather than stay in you and solidify and concretize into things that are just coming from stories in your head. They're all just, as I said earlier, I really believe it's just an abundance of energy. And then our relationship, the stories that we tell ourselves really concretize these associations, these pathways that we have to the emotions. Whereas if we just let it come through us and let them free, then we can decide where we want to take the thoughts. And so, yeah, I hope that you give yourself permission and know that it's so beautiful to just like let it out. I mean,
I love that. I've always felt that communication is where we heal the most, whether it's our personal relationships or our business relationships. And like you said, it also takes the power away from a situation when you say the truth out loud. Or I've said this to Nazi, my mom said to me, tell the truth fast. You know, just we need to get it out. We need to communicate. We need to talk and be heard and have it reflected back to us. And I just want to acknowledge Sue. She said, I just want to thank you all for your positivity today. I've been in a poor me state since Friday after being confirmed of, she mentioned some physical ailments that she's going through. And she's thinking, why me? Why does my body hate me? And she wants to thank you guys for inspiring her and to look at these disorders as a gift. She says, I know that they've made me stronger emotionally as a whole because of the daily discomfort. And I just, you know, she wants to say thank you. And she wants to have the courage to thank herself for going through these experiences and appreciates you guys reminding her of that. So, and then Isabella said, thank you. That was incredibly helpful to her. Any last thoughts, you guys? I want to be respectful of people's time. This is the Respect Project after all, and I asked only an hour of your time.
Well, let me just quickly say, first of all, thank you to everyone who listened today to us. And as is always the case, you're here to share your experiences, and I'm taking away more than I thought I could offer, and for that I'm very grateful. I especially want to say to SEPIDEH, I left Iran on September 17th, 1978, and I am forever mindful of those that I left behind and how much luckier I was. And I am so grateful for people like you and your family who were able to get out. And every time I hear a story, it makes me very happy and very glad. And to all of you for your comments. I realize now that I deal with chaos the way I do because chaos is the natural state of things, and that I should react to my soul instead of trying to get my mind to overrule my heart in all matters. And that I have been to the edge of the abyss, and I have learned that, you know, there is life after, and it's a good life. So thank you to everyone who listened to us. It's really terrific to have your love and support and feel like we have something to share. And Elisabeth, thank you for convening these conversations. And I hope that we will drive a forceful one about diversity in the workplace, which begins with respect for everyone.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And again, somehow I created the Respect Project, I think, because I needed it. And I started the conversation with you guys saying that I'm struggling with a lot right now personally. And so this has been incredibly helpful for me. And I think coming from that truthful narrative of who we are, telling the truth to each other on behalf of each other, and trying to stay positive in what we know will be always an ever-changing and chaotic world. So I just have one last thought I want to share with you. Mahatma Gandhi said, keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive because your behavior becomes your habits. Keep your habits positive because your habits become your values. And keep your values positive because your values become your destiny. So I wish you guys a beautiful day, a beautiful week. We'll be doing another Respect Project talk on March 7th with women in leadership. And I send you off with great respect and love. And thank you for your time.